on 2 years to really think about our wellness, our mental health, and substance use recovery, healing, trauma-informed care in our community. But also not just to think about it, but to think about how do we improve it? How do we improve it? How do we support loved ones and those who we serve in our community to make sure they are well and safe? Too often, many of us are aware that police intervention and police response does not address the underlying causes of mental health and substance use needs and harm reduction needs in our community. Oftentimes, we know that that often leads to more harm. And it also often is leading to people being incarcerated, kind of funneling through the system, coming out, and the cycle just repeating. So this is a group of engaged community members seeking to actually move the needle in policy and advocacy, as well as in the community, to make sure that the things that we are already doing, restorative practices, transformative care, trauma-informed care, holistic health and care, is really the things that we want to uplift and invest more in. So this group has gotten together for a little over a year now to partake in strategic planning, strategic thinking, and really just powwowing and solutionizing and idealizing where do we go from here, right? Not necessarily depending on the system, but knowing that we are the system, we are the solution, right? And so instead of waiting on that policy change to happen, we have to actually begin to invest in our own care, in our own communities. We've already been doing that. You all are here representing organizations that are already doing a lot of that work. So today, we just want to uplift you all, the work that you're doing, share about the work we're doing, and continue to just be in community and in fellowship with one another. How does that sound? Great. So that is our why. And so today, as we kick off our celebration for Mental Health Awareness Month, I really want to ground in, and I don't want to, we'll bring up Valerie momentarily, but we really want to ground and be on the same page when we start talking about mental health, right? Because we have various definitions, even various whys for why we're here, right? So we kind of all want to get grounded, make sure we're on the same page as we think about not only mental health, but also how do we care, considering that a lot of us have been deeply impacted by trauma, and the people we serve are deeply impacted by trauma. So we're looking forward to amazing speakers coming up to share more with us. Think of this as a community space where we get to learn together, network with each other. This is a space where you should be having connected with someone new or with new people. This is not a classroom discussion where you just kind of come listen and lead. We want to make sure that we are interacting with one another. And we'll be uplifting all of our roundtable partners throughout this time, and we want you to come fellowship with us at the end after we hear from our speakers. But let me actually turn it over to Lakhania to kind of walk us through our community agreements and where we're going to go throughout our time together.
All righty, thank y'all. Thanks so much for your patience, and thank you, lovely Sheba, for all that you do. Okay, so to jump on into it, this is like our overview for today. We are going to continue with some mental health discussions, and then we're going to talk about the roundtable. What is it? Who are the partners that are involved in it? And then we'll do a couple of spotlights of our community partners that are involved and that are here today. And then we'll transition out into breakout groups where you guys can understand like what's the work that we're doing tangibly and which working group you want to sign up for if you want to get involved. So that's our little overview for today. We'll also have a 5-minute break, of course, so you can stretch your legs and chill a little bit because we're going to be talking a lot. So, community agreements. These are some of the community agreements that we've come together to discuss as a roundtable. But please share if there's any more that y'all like to add. I'll just announce some of them. We have Speak from the Heart, respect the identities of all in the space, take care of yourself, take the lessons, leave the stories, confidentiality, impact over intent, one mic, step up, step back, using I statements, be brave, be transparent, silence technology so that we can all be present and limit distractions. Would anyone like to add on in, or are y'all good with these? Okay, sounds like we're good. Cool. Alrighty. So next we will have lovely Valerie Bonner come on up to the stage to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
And
situation. And also stop thinking they're so resilient because they're still playing their video games and they're still hanging out with their friends and they're still going through school, because inside of there is that little girl that I just described to you that grows up and need mental health services because my mother did not do a good job of raising me not to. With that, we will move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie.
We will have the building awareness panel. What is mental health and why is it important? So Julie Weatherhead. Ali Lakhania, am I saying that right? Okay, and the two of you, it is your turn. So come on up.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Okay.
Hey, hey. Hi. Hey, hi. Yeah, thanks for having me today. My name's Julie Weatherhead. I'm so honored and happy to be here, especially to see some of the people I've seen online in person. I'm part of the roundtable that DJC put together. And as you can see on there, it says, I'm a grief doula and tender. And you're like, what the fuck is that? Somebody had just asked me too, like, what's the death doula? What's the grief doula? And so I'm very happy, to talk about that. They also asked me to talk a little bit about mental health in general. And so I'm also a licensed professional counselor. My background is I'm Arab American. My mom is Syrian. My dad is super white, I call it, English, Irish, Scottish. So I grew up in a little bit of a bicultural household. My mom was a Detroiter, born and raised, and then also a suburban person. But I made my way back to Detroit, which I feel very grateful for, to be in the space with you today, and to be a learned person from my community around me. And so Gigi's House is an organization that I'm a part of, and I started. I'm a director and a co-founder, and it stands for Got Grief House. Who has grief? Who has had grief in this room? We all got it, right? We all got it, and if you don't, it's coming for you. So how are you going to get ready to stay ready to take care of yourself, take care of the people that you love around you? Mental health as well. And I put up here too, the only constant is change in life. And when we talk about grief, I'm not just talking about somebody dying. Grief is loss and change. It can even be a positive change. I worked in schools for 10 years, and when I decided to leave, I grieved that way harder than I thought I would. Way harder. Super excited about not getting up at 6 a.m. Real pumped about that. But being away from a community, stepping away from those kids, it was a huge gap of grief for me. And I found ways eventually to figure out, I'm grieving really hard. But, that was a positive move for me, and I still have that grief because it was change, it was transition. So, understanding things are going to change, you're going to have grief about it. Whether it's a really positive thing, a really tragic thing, so how are we going to prepare ourselves? The brain is the body is the brain. Say it with me. The brain is the body.
The brain is the body.
The body is the brain.
The body is the brain.
Right? It is all connected. You're all one big system here. So learning about the nervous system, how do we go into survival, right? As Valerie was saying too, I was a child when my brother died. He died very traumatically, very suddenly in the home with me and my mom. We didn't know that he was sick.
So emotions play out in the theater of the body. Emotions are energy, right? You can feel it in your body. If you start to think about it and try to notice it, which is very hard too, because we've been just told work, 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 work. Your body is for working, it's not for feeling, it's for producing. But, can you start to notice your body? This is a poem that we probably don't have time for. Rumi is a poet, guest house. This human being, this is part of the poem, is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house. Empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. I'm catching your feelings right now, right? Can you do a quick cry? What do you see crying as? Because I know my mom said, "Are you crying?" She obviously could see I'm crying, right? But I was told that's not good. Don't show that. Crying is cleansing, okay? Let's just associate that. Again, we gotta train our brain and our hearts. What is this for? How can I use this to help sweep me for some new delight? How do I release and tend when I'm feeling and not be pissed at myself or angry and also how do I keep myself safe in spaces where I can't do that? Because we are in spaces where we do have to keep our heart, keep ourselves moving, or we can't go to the bathroom. But there are some questions too of, well, can you go to the bathroom and take a moment for yourself? Can you say, I need a moment? I'm really proud of myself. I'm 41 and I feel like I've mastered the quick cry. People are like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's sad." Wipe my tears, take a deep breath, be in it for a second, and then keep it moving. It's not forbidden, it's not bad, it's good. You're cleansing, you're releasing, because your body will hold that shit. Keep pushing it down, push it down. In Chinese medicine, they relate emotions with your organs. Does anybody hear that before? What's grief related with? Anybody know that already? The lungs. That's what they relate grief with, right? And to me, that makes a lot of sense as somebody who's just like, right? And I've went through some other losses that were pretty big in my life. I remember when my grandmother died, she's like my best friend. It felt like, and we're very physical with each other. It felt like somebody literally scooped my chest out. It was freaky. Freaked me right out. I'm like going to my friend who's a yoga teacher being like, "What is happening? Do you know anything about this? How do I get part of my body back that I feel like I just left," right? So again, the noticing, the accepting, the making space for, the teaching, the modeling for the children. And me as a child too, I understand that children are going through so much, right? They have so much cool stuff going on with friends and just life in general, and then a big event happens, and people put them back in school, get them back in routine, they need ritual. It might be true, right? But they also need that space to breathe, they need that space to feel. They need somebody to check in on them, maybe who's even not their parent, and say, "How are you doing? Is there anything you want to release today?" Mental illness, thanks for running through some of these slides to get back to kind of the deal. This is something that's measured, and we know how many people are walking around that will never go get a diagnosis for anything. What's the trust that we have with our medical system, right? As Shiva said, we're the people that are here to come and help be with each other and try to help find safe connections for us to go to get help and understand, do I have, some depression? Do I live with some anxiety? Do I live with some post-traumatic stress disorder? And I put this on here, lasts longer than 1 month, for it. We went to that family group and our group session, I guess, at last, my brain repressed, right? Because sometimes when you're in trauma, your brain will just disappear things, right? It says, I'm going to keep you safe, I'm just going to take that out of your memory then. Sometimes that's not bad, right? It can be a little weird when you hear about it later, but the grief and the trauma, that was something too to think about when you have a big thing happen in life. Those can be intersected, right? But also separate. So luckily we had a family friend, once they noticed how disturbed I was and I was hiding it from a lot of people but they could see it. I got help from a family friend who gave us a free session, at our house, right? Somebody she knew. So I got help for my trauma, but I never got help for my grief. And then the grief showed up real hard when I went away from home. So it's just interesting to think too about mental health, anxiety, depression, trauma. You can have different things going on in your brain and your body. What are the ways you need to meet those things? Who are the people that can kind of help us, right? How and why does this happen? Could be your genes, could be your family history. Nothing could have happened. And it could just be in your system from your womb space and your mom passing it down generation after generation. And I know people in this room know about that. Trauma being passed down generation after generation. Scarcity mindset. We don't got time to deal with that. Keep it moving. What are the messaging that we receive generation after generation to survive? You're in survival. Down here too, you can't see it, but feeling lonely or isolated. This can also be a trigger, right? That can seem like something small when we talk about comparatively a big traumatic event happening. But we are a very capitalistic, individualist society, right? We've lost a lot of our cultural traditions. Thank God spaces like this exist. Thank God spaces like all of you, a lot of you in this room have created to create that community where you can see another human being for a minute and not have it be about production or work, just about love. So again, Ali's going to talk about trauma a little bit, but I can never talk about mental health without talking about trauma. And I put change. I just want you to think about that too. Because a traumatic event for somebody might not be a traumatic event for somebody else. If that makes sense, right? Everybody's got their own gauge and their own understanding of where they come from and what's important to them. That will determine that. So you can, and also another definition of trauma, which Ali, I don't want to steal your shine, but is when an event happens, how are you taken care of after that? Because shit's going to happen in life. That's going to be really hard, really difficult. Sometimes it's out of your control. It happens to you. The traumatic part can also sometimes be the lack of support that comes after, right? The stuff is going to happen. What happens after where you're held and you're noticed and you're listened to and you're loved and you're validated and witnessed and not shoved down. No, we got to keep going. So grief is an emotional recognition that something is missing. To acknowledge rather than dismiss this missing is a sacred act of reverencing absence. We can miss what has been. We can also miss what has never been. Right? So a family member in your life that you want to be close with, that you've never gotten to meet, or they're not in the emotional state where they can have a connection with you at all. Right? They could be living, not living. They could be, this could be a relationship, a lifestyle you thought, right? I knew by 27 I was going to be married and I was going to have 3 kids. I might agree with it. I don't agree with it now. But you had this vision of like what my life is going to be like, right? And best made plans is a saying I like to say. Best made plans. It's going to change. And then, we talked about this before. And I want to bring this up, brain science. It's all right. They're starting to do, you guys know this too, right? Like we're pretty behind on brain science and research and data. They were like, oh, we know how to fix a broken leg, we're good. Now we're realizing that again, the brain is the body is the brain. Your brain is sending messages all the time and telling you how to survive. Do I need to fight? Do I need to, Ali's going to talk about that. So, you having brain fog, grief brain fog, right? That's normal. Your brain is making sense of something that happened. Somebody said pregnancy brain, and I'm starting to say grief brain. You can also have grief brain when you're overwhelmed, trying to rewire and relocate. This book, The Grieving Brain by Mary Frances O'Connor, entertainment. That's a feelings wheel, and if you look it up, there's tons of them out there. They're in different languages, Arabic, Spanish, English. Thank you so much, Sheba. You can go to the next one. This is the body maps of emotion. So I was trying to, we were talking earlier about how it's in you. Your emotions are energy. They will create heat. They will create absence, cold, right? They did this study with folks who they enlisted these emotions within them and then this body mapping, right, of heat. So this is what they kind of describe feeling. And you can see, the red, the hot, So we can go to the next one. That's again talking about these physical signs. How do you know you're having some really big emotions? And you don't have the language for it, but you know what you're feeling inside. Again, making those connections of like, okay, I feel tenseness, what do I need? Keep going. I think go back one more. No, okay, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. So fear. I really like this one too. False evidence appearing real. Sometimes evidence is not false too, just to validate that sometimes you need to have fear and your fight or flight needs to get going. You need to make decisions. But sometimes we're conditioned. I noticed this in myself in my personal relationships, especially new romantic relationships where I'm like having these patterns from my family that they activate and I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna go that way. I know this pattern. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm not that. I'm like, okay. I gotta retrain myself to know that, okay, this is my fear. And it's making me go this way. I need to take a step back and be curious. Have a tough conversation with myself and that person. Yeah, how do we find safety in situations? The drive to survive versus the longing to connect. That's kind of that talk about like what's on the other side of a really difficult conversation, and then also is that other person even able to have that conversation? That's a whole other thing. Keep going. I want to find a way to wrap it up. So name it to tame it, know it to cope with it. Once you can name it, this is what I'm feeling. These are the feeling. These are the bundle of emotions. So how do I cope with it? How do I not tell it to fuck off and go away? Because that's not nice. You gotta talk to yourself nice. You gotta treat it, you're a guest house. You gotta welcome them. So how do you take care of those emotions? How do you soothe yourself? What's a food that's nice for you? What's a smell? I'm really big on smell. Your smell is one of your strongest senses that can really transport you to another place, right? Is there a smell that's comforting? Whether it's Vicks Vapor Rub, some eucalyptus, whether it's cleaning. I've had kids, I work a lot with kids too. I've had kids say cleaning supplies, right? Like that smell of like the lemongrass or whatever. But what can you have on your person? A rough rock and a smooth rock. Because your brain is automatic, babe. How do you interrupt it? When do you know you need support? You're a breathing, living person. You don't just need support. Let's change it to you deserve support. And how do you maybe even connect with somebody before shit goes down? Right? Wouldn't that be nice to just have somebody that you're like, okay, I've connected with this therapist or this social worker or this leader in a community organization. Now when that happens, the thing, you already kind of have an entryway and a pathway. Does that make sense? So get ready to stay ready. And then this is just some kind of basic info, right, on who can help us. And the bottom one here, support systems. Who are your peoples, your communities to join? And a lot of people in this room, again, have created those communities, which is so beautiful, so crucial for mental health, to belong to something. One-on-one therapy, yep. There's so many different types of one-on-one therapy too, which is kind of overwhelming at some points, but there's options. Yep, name it to tame it, know what to cope with it, who's on your squad, care for your physical health. Dancing is caring for your physical health, gardening is caring for your physical health, going on a walk is caring for your physical health. I heard trampolines are real good for that, even a little baby one in your house. You gotta shake it off, right? It's in you. It's in you and on you. In Ireland they say grief is on me, right? It's okay. How do you process it and release some of it? Yeah, take a picture of this if you want. It's kind of nice.
me a little bit. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Seth's calling Julie because Julie is awesome. She's awesome. Sometimes nice to cut to from time to time. Hey, what's going on? Let's grab coffee. Okay, thank you all so much for joining and being here. And something really interesting is Valerie. I think it's like an unusual thing. I'm so used to seeing little boxes up and doing. Here to see some actual faces and people and match those names to faces. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Oh yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm going to be talking today about trauma-informed care. And so Julie did a great job of outlining what mental health is and what it's in. Excuse me. But now, trauma is something that is oftentimes it's extremely prevalent in our communities, but we don't even really know what it is and how to name it. And so here's the definition. Now this definition is from the SAMHSA, so that's kind of the governmental organization around mental health. But they define it as trauma is a result from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that an individual experiences as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, which may have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So there are 3 key words on this slide that are highlighted. And so we have the event, the experience, and the effect. So what does that mean exactly? I'll use this example from time to time, but say for example, I was in a car accident and Linda was in the car with me, God forbid. And we were both in that car accident. We both experienced that car accident. That was the event that we had. Now, while we both had the same event, I might be really shaken up afterwards. I might have some trouble sleeping that night, kind of constantly rethinking it, revisiting it in my head, maybe even dreaming about it. And then maybe a month goes by and I'm still hesitant, I'm still fearful. I still maybe don't want to get into the car. And so that is that after effect. Meanwhile, Linda, yeah, she was in a car accident, it happened, and she was okay. She's now able to function, she's going about her normal routine. Nothing really impacting her in terms of getting in the way of her functioning on a day-to-day level. So what's really important about that is that we both went through the same experience. And yet, maybe it was traumatic for me, I don't know, it was traumatic for her. So what's really important to notice is that it's a subjective thing. While we both experienced the same thing, we both experienced the same event, our effect afterwards was different. So that's all to say that we aren't the people who are defining, oh, well, that's not a traumatic event. I'm not going to tell Princess, oh, that wasn't traumatic. What do I know? She's the expert in her experience in that effect afterwards. I don't know what she's been through. I don't know what she's going through. And so, really, that brings us back to what trauma-informed care is. I like to think of it as, you may have heard this term, universal precautions. That's what we use in healthcare, where you don't know what other people or what you may be coming into the space with, so you just take those precautions as a baseline. Your nurse or your provider are going to wash their hands before every interaction. People will put gloves on in those healthcare settings because we don't know. So similarly with trauma, we don't know. And so shifting focus a little bit to the different types of trauma that we have. So there are things like acute trauma, which are those immediate kind of injuries, or like a car accident, for example. That's an acute trauma. It happened in that, it's a short-lived thing, it happened, and now we're dealing with the effects afterwards. So you have chronic trauma. So these are traumatic experiences that actually happen over a period of time. Things like abuse, neglect, vicarious complex trauma. And vicarious trauma is the trauma that many of us may have experienced. It's that trauma from being on the other side, from the helper's perspective, where we're only absorbing all of some terrible things. We're absorbing it, and we are listening to these stories, and we're empathizing, and yet we're rooting for ourselves. So that can actually turn into what we call vicarious trauma, which can have very real symptoms and signs, just like PTSD. Then you have systemic. I know we all know about this.
If you want it.
But yeah, so we're talking about things like systemic trauma, like racism, oppression, living in a capitalistic society, incarceration, religious persecution. These are all examples of systemic trauma that ancestral pandemics. We've all lived through that. War, genocide. These are all different types of trauma that there's something on this list that we've all experienced, and some more than others. So oftentimes you hear about trauma, and especially in this day and age of TikTok and social media, you often hear about, oh yeah, that's trauma, or you need to find a trauma-specific thing, or a traumatic thing. You just talk about the definition of trauma. You talk about how it's subjective. But at the same time, it can also be misinterpreted, or just from a lack of understanding, it may be confused with other things. So oftentimes stress. So trauma and stress aren't the same things. And oftentimes I tell people, I kind of need that. I'm terrible when it comes to like deadlines. And actually, I'm so sorry, Lakhania and Lauren, you know this about me this morning when I took over this PowerPoint presentation. Terrible about deadlines. I'm the best procrastinator you'll ever meet, or I'm the worst. Who knows? But that is a stress. That's a stressor. That deadline is a stressor. Once that deadline has passed, I'm good. I don't have to worry about it. With trauma though, that's just the main difference. Where once that traumatic event is over, and still having that after effect and that experience, it's still ongoing. And so that's really the main difference is that trauma is a negative thing. Stress can be a positive. Lighting that fire under my ass, that's a positive. Because I need that. Trauma is. And so shifting gears a little bit to talking about other types of trauma. And I think this is something that's really important that often isn't talked about enough. It's called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or even adverse community environments. And so ACEs, this was a study that was done maybe 2000s, I believe now, but they were basically looking at a group, a population of people, and they wanted to figure out, obviously they knew that when things happen early on in life, that can have impacts later on in life as well. It doesn't just leave you, those things stay with you. And so they looked at these different factors that may have happened before the age of 18, and they wanted to map out what that looked like later on in life. And so, as a culmination of all of that, they came up with the ACEs model, adverse childhood experiences. So they list out these 18 to 20 things that they found can directly be linked to challenges later on in life. So things like neglect, abuse, household dysfunction. And then later on, they actually expanded more recently, in around 2017, I believe, they expanded this model to now include those adverse community environments. So that is now called the parabases, or we call it the roots and then the tree. And on this next slide, you'll see kind of that depiction. So you have things like emotional and physical neglect. You have divorce, mental illness, unhoused or housing insecurity, poor housing quality, violence, lack of opportunity, community disruption and discrimination. These are all things that can play into, like Julie was talking about earlier, these things don't just leave you. They can stick with you and they can actually have impacts later on in life. And so some of those impacts that they were actually able to trace this directly to include things like heart disease, cancers, lung disease. So these are all tied back to early childhood experiences. Now, while that may be true, it doesn't mean that, oh yeah, I can check off like 5 of these things on this list of ACEs, I'm gonna end up with heart disease later on in life. I'm gonna end up with substance use challenges later on in life. It's not a sentence. That's not what it means. What it means though is that you may be at greater risk, and so you need to be more prepared and, like Julie was talking about, have that person, have those support systems in place. And so even when it comes to things like opportunity, they saw a decrease in opportunity later on in life. Risky, quote unquote, risky behavior is what they call it. Chronic diseases, infectious diseases, maternal health, which as you know, live in the city of Detroit. There's a reason for that. And oftentimes all of these things are just kind of put on the person, oh, well, this is your fault. You don't eat healthy. Or you don't exercise enough. It's not that simple at the end of the day. And as Julie was talking about, a lot of these things can be passed on from generation to generation. So being aware of this is just the first step so that you can actually take steps to avoid it later on in life. So at the end of the day, it's not a sentence. And tying all of that into, this is a term that's oftentimes you may hear in the healthcare setting, social determinants of health. So these are kind of the environments that we live in, that we grow up in, and all of the experiences that we have, that we can experience in those areas. So things like economic stability, educational access, healthcare access, our neighborhood and built environment, our social and community context, These are all social determinants of health that can also lead into how healthy we are. And something that was really interesting to me when I first learned about it is one of the biggest indications of good health is actually determined by your zip code. So your zip code is the biggest determinant of how healthy and how long you live. We're in the big year of 2026, living in America, and we have zip codes that have terrible outcomes solely based on where they live and the opportunities that they have access to. That should not be the case. So, shifting gears a little bit now to what responses to trauma look like. And so, Julie talked about this a little bit earlier, the fight, flight response. And essentially we expect now the 4 Fs. So we have fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And you might recognize a lot of these. For that fight response, you might recognize some frustration, anger. Someone may be demanding or they seem controlling or aggressive. And I hate that term aggressive because oftentimes it's weaponized, but they may seem guarded. When someone may have that reaction of flight, that could seem like anxiety, overthinking, a busybody, feeling unsettled or restless, perfectionism, which is a big one. That freeze response could look like depression, dissociation, feeling struck or in that brain fog, and then also feeling that isolation or that numbness. And then lastly, fawn. And this one is oftentimes under-recognized, but that people-pleasing desire or that codependency, lack of boundaries. And then also feeling like self-abandonment. And so those are kind of the 4 Fs that they've expanded it to now. And some of those reactions could be physical, emotional, cognitive, social, or even relationships. And so looking at that in some of those different domains, on the next slide here. So before we jump into that though, let's jump into, we'll do a quick dive into some anatomy here. This is switching. Yes. Here. Oh, yeah. I love that.
The hand model. So you guys ever see that where you can do your brain right here in your hand? Yeah, so you got your hand, right? And you got the middle part right here, and you just wrap that right on over, right? And this is your brain stem, right here. This is the amygdala, yeah, right here. So this little here, right here, that's your emotions and kind of your memories. And then this wrap around right here, it's that prefrontal cortex or frontal cortex. And when you're a kid, and they kind of extend a kid to about 35, I've heard now. Like, you know, they're like, when does the brain stop developing? Which I don't know if I can hate that question because people are like, well, I can't change. This is the way I am. I'm like, oh, really? Like, neuroplasticity is a thing. You can change your brain. You can change your pathways. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be really hard, but you can do it. But anyways, they use the term when I've taught it with the kids and adults, what happens when you flip your lid and you're not making decisions with this frontal cortex, right? It's not all integrated and all together. You're kind of making decisions right here from this fear memory, right? When I said before in that relationship, when something happens that triggers me and I jump right into the conclusion that, well, this is going to happen now. I'm making decisions from here, and I start getting defensive, and I back up from that person. I'm not being logical. I'm not thinking with my whole brain, right? And making logical thoughts and decisions and being able to be calm. So yeah, that's it. I get real excited about the hand model.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same. It's the hand model. And really what that looks like is you have your amygdala and your hippocampus. Those are responsible for the more quote-unquote basic functions, really are necessary functions. Breathing, our heart rate, just things that we need to be able to actually live. And oftentimes our prefrontal cortex isn't really focused in that moment when a trauma is happening because we don't really need to have that deep level of thought. We just need to know how am I reacting in this moment. Do I need to run? Do I need to be careful? Do I need to watch out for that bear that's coming towards me? And so also we aren't really learning new things in that moment. Our hippocampus becomes underutilized. We aren't really focused on forming new memories right now. We're just focused on getting away from danger. So that's why oftentimes when you hear about someone recounting their trauma, it's not always linear. It's not always in order. Because that's not how the memory was formed. And so being really aware of that. And I really love this very busy chart because it shows what the different things could look like. And And so, for example, in the middle, you have that active or alert, where it's a moderate level of arousal. So that could look like our pupils are widening, our eyes are less moist, our digestion is decreased, our contact with self and others may be decreased. So I really like how this breaks it down, and it also shows, okay, is this an area where this person may be receptive to my feedback, or maybe we just need to focus on care in this moment. And then moving on to this next table, which again, this just kind of outlines some of the different feelings that may come up after a traumatic event. But I think this one's really important to highlight as well in the spiritual domain, because oftentimes that's not always talked about either.
Yeah.
That feeling of abandonment. Like, what did I do? Is God no longer with me, or is that my being no longer with me, or keeping an eye out for me? So being mindful and really working with people and talking to people through that. And then, so we talked about all of these different things, and what that looks like is this, what we call dysregulation. So this next slide really shows a great visual of that. And I kind of talk about it like a roller coaster, where on a day-to-day, we kind of ride that blue line in the middle, where there are times where we may be activated, there are times where we may be more chill. But what happens when we're outside of that kind of ideal range? And that's where that green line comes into play. So there are things that may take us outside of that optimal range. And so that's what this regulation would look like. And how do we bring ourselves back into that optimal range so that we're still able to respond to things, and we're able to do it with a sense of care, and we still have ourselves in that, where we aren't stopping our living. So moving on to what that actually looks like. So how do we go from a place of trauma and stress to healing and resilience? Number one is safety. We gotta be able to have that safety, both physical safety and then the psychological safety. And really that brings us to those 6 principles of a trauma-informed approach. And starting with those 4 assumptions, so we have these 4 assumptions for a trauma-informed approach, which are realize, recognize, respond, and resist. So starting with realizing that trauma is widespread, and then being able to recognize some of those signs and symptoms, because it's not always going to be like, I have trauma. It's going to show up as some of those feelings and those signs and symptoms that we talked about. It's being able to respond in an appropriate manner where we aren't villainizing that feeling or that behavior. And then being able to resist. At the end of the day, one of the core tenets of a trauma-informed approach is that, unfortunately, trauma can't necessarily be 100% avoided, but we can resist that re-traumatization. And so, kind of wrapping up with our 6 principles here of a trauma-informed approach, starting off with number 1, safety. Number 2, trustworthiness and transparency. We aren't always going to get it right. But when we start with that trust and that building that trust and that transparency, that's the first step there. Peer support is a big one. Being able to connect, and like Julie talked about her peer support group. The reason why they work so well is because now you have someone with that lived experience, someone who's actually been through something similar to what you've been through. It's very different when a doctor comes in a white phone and says, here's what to expect, versus someone who's actually been through it, and they know where you come from, and they know what you've been through, and they can talk you through it. Collaboration and mutuality. Don't you just love when your doctor comes in and tells you, here's what you're going to do? What do you know? Like, you're not in charge of me. I am my own person. I can make decisions myself. So let's collaborate. Let's have a conversation about what we can and can't do. Empowerment. Going back to that decision making, empowering people to make their own decisions because they're the experts in their experiences. And then keeping in mind the cultural, historical, and gender issues that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. And again, creating safety is around some of these opportunities around infusing consent and choice. Compassionate communications, healthy connections, honoring the pace, and having that co-regulation, and then really, if nothing else, just listening and validating. And I will stop there. I'm way over, so here's my contact information. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. I am a poster child for all of that. So I've been through it all. It is time for our 5-minute break. So it is. I stand correct. So let's do Q&A. Any questions? Yes.
Specifically regarding trauma, from a lay perspective, So, you know what, I want to think about the whole COVID lockdown. And I'm just curious as to whether or not you are familiar if there's any type of research or discussion about the results of COVID and the lockdown for 2.5 years and how it affected, people. And I just haven't heard that, but I'm just wondering if you're familiar or if you know about that, because in my mind, that was trauma.
Yeah, collective.
So I'm just wondering whether or not you've heard of any discussions about, how people were affected by, not just physically, we know the mental part, but how it's the fallout from it.
Yeah. I work with kids still. I was working in the schools for 10 to 12 years, and during COVID, my family asked me, "Are you going to be okay?" Right? Because I was isolated. I'm a very social, connected person, and I had to find some youth groups to try to work with. But as I continue to get back into the school system, and what I've heard, right, from people, and you guys might be the experts on this too, so I'm really curious in the room if anybody else has any thoughts or feelings or information. I feel like this year some kids have started to be a little bit more out of the house, is what I've heard. The fallout was that I was hearing about a lot of young people at least, is I don't want to get my driver's license. I don't need to leave the house.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, a lot of people actually trying to actively, get engaged and trying to get out the house more.
Yeah,
A lot of people are saying they're stuck,
Yeah.
they're trying to get stuck into the house and,
yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah, so it's different, I think, too, on where you're at, what community, and what it was like during that time, too, like what the lockdown was like in one family might have been different for another family, where they're really, really hyper strict, maybe you have somebody that's immunocompromised, and you still can't go out, or you still have to wear, a mask, so you're in that feeling of being repressed and trapped a little bit. I know personally that I tried to talk to the city about, I was like, I think we need a memorialization spot, permanent, from COVID. We lost a lot of people, so like the grief that went unaddressed in these kids and these adults and people and families that didn't get to have a funeral especially, that don't feel like they have that closure, and also as like a person that deals with grief, I've had to try to talk to folks too, of like, you gotta have that funeral still. If that's what you think your body and your heart might need, who cares if it's years later? Maybe it's just you and a friend at the river. So I don't know if we as a country gave too many shits about it either, right? Like we're pushing through. We gotta keep making money, and so I think it's a beautiful, great question and wondering, and again, I wonder if anybody else has any information about that. I haven't looked into it, but I have noticed that I've heard from some parents that kids that did feel traumatized from that and down are starting to come back a little bit into norming, and I say kids and adults. I think last year for me it was like, okay, this is my new normal of what we just went through together.
Yeah, I saw a lot, and still see a lot of what you were speaking about, especially with young people. I mean, they miss graduation, they don't even really know how to socialize with people,
Yeah.
and they kind of pull back. And I see it in my grandson, because so many of those interactions, they missed. And there's, and even in myself, and people, COVID changed me for the rest of my life, and so much so. And I know I've heard of some projects to help people to recognize why they feel the way they are, but not enough.
Yeah, and studies usually will come from the government, right? And so many medical studies have been pulled, like the funding for that has been pulled, so I feel like it's probably really low on their list to think about that impact, unfortunately. But it is a good question, and I'm gonna keep thinking about even making that permanent memorial spot where we can list the names of people that we lost in the city and like have a spot to go grieve. Because that was taken away from a lot of people in the moment.
And most of the research that I've seen has been around it's really, it's like, to Jason's point, it's a selective grief that I don't think has been properly addressed. And then now, like, this would have been essentially an opportunity to do that, but now the funding has been pulled out. So we can't even properly assess the impact afterwards.
Yeah, what you want, I don't want to put all that, I just want to say to you, I know that, when I graduated in my job, my education.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know what happened to me.
Yeah.
It's probably crazy, because, you know, it was just such a traumatic
Mhm.
situation.
Hell yeah, I lost my grandparents, both of them, 3 months with each other. I'm a grief counselor. People are like, you must be really busy. And I'm like, yeah, with myself. Because, you know, like, how many clients can I take on right now? It's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah.
Dion Riggin from Free People, Free People. My question is, when you were giving your lecture on emotions and crying, releasing and, being a cleanser,
Yeah.
you know, when me growing up, and I'm quite sure other people experience this as well, you know, I was taught not to cry.
Yeah.
Hold your hands, be tough, don't let it out, don't show no emotion, people gonna think you soft, people on this, people gonna do this and that. So when we go through this emotion and letting our children know that it's okay to release and to let that out without being criticized by your peers, to let them know that it's okay to do that. How do we change the trajectory of letting our children know that it's okay to do it? Sometimes people go off into themselves and cry. You know, some people just can't hold their tears in because of the emotion that's happening with them while they're feeling with the trauma or whatever is triggering them from releasing that cleansing. Because, you know, I cried the other day, just because I was celebrating my mother. You know, seeing them brought not joy to pain, but joy to, happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness like
Yeah.
that. So how do we change the trajectory of our children knowing that it's okay to release that and clean themselves when the ridicule may come to them?
Yep.
Why you being a punk? Why you being a sick? We don't do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Toughen up.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of people in prison can't show that kind of emotion either. Because
Yeah.
you're on the phone talking to somebody and you just get something hit you in the head, or your mother just passed away, or your son just got killed. You can't show that. You can't show that emotion right there. You have to literally wait till the middle of the night,
Yeah.
when lights is out, and hold it in under your pillow so you can't so you can let it all out.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
my question. How do we change the trajectory
Yeah.
of the children and then releasing that?
Absolutely. I think even what you just said about the nighttime, I know like as a kid griever and also when I talk to adult grievers, that a lot of us know that the nighttime is the hardest time because it's quiet, you're alone, you do feel a little bit more safe finally and cozy, like you're being held, even if it's your own bed or your own pillow. And so I think even like when we're teaching young people about life and emotions and events, that distinction too of what I said earlier, sometimes you're not in a safe space, right? And that's like, you're in front of a boss that's a fucking asshole. And like, you know, like, you don't want to be vulnerable with this person. They're not safe to be vulnerable with. They're going to hold it against you. They're going to put it on, you know, they're going to call you weak in their mind or whatever. So I think like in all situations across their lifespan, there's going to be times where you don't feel safe to cry in front of people. But then the challenge is going to be, how do we normalize crying in bed at night? And say, I do that too sometimes, or I've done that. Or, you know, like, and this is what I have to do in this area, and now I'm here. And now where are spaces that can you model yourself to cry in front of them?
But after cleansing yourself, you feel better. You do definitely feel better.
And
You
talking
get-
about the
you get-
science.
You get a lot of stuff off that, you know,
Yeah.
you can feel the release.
I like teaching kids about science, brain science, about hormones, releasing that the tears, they have different DNA. Different teardrops have different DNA they found of what type of tears they are, right? And like that you're releasing cortisol. What is cortisol? Teach them about stress hormones, right? So it goes back to like really like, what's your
saying your mind can be tricked. You can be watching a movie.
Yeah.
You can start crying. The movie, you crying, and I'm sitting up there wondering why this is
Yeah,
happening.
and it's the humanness, right? Oh, you got emotions. You are human, especially with AI shit coming up, right? You talk about what are the advantages of being a human? What are the things that you can do that a robot can't, and why is that important? And what is being vulnerable? What is the definition of vulnerability? Does it mean weakness or strength? So it's going back to that emotional intelligence, teaching them about all the different types of intelligences they can have. I love doing that with kids. I'm like, LeBron James, what kind of intelligence can you see mostly that he has right away? Physical intelligence. His
Yes.
body flows, he's naturally got it. There's somebody really good at math. They have academic math intelligence. They don't gotta work for it. Some people are really good at their emotions and knowing it, communicating it. You know, all these social intelligence, are you street smart? Where you, sometimes people aren't born with that. And you have to learn, or they get, you know, whatever. Sometimes they don't, but how do you know that emotional intelligence is important too? It's like this really wraparound thing. Hard though.
I got the 2-minute warning, so, can you say it in 2 minutes?
I want to take this first.
Okay.
I just, quick question, how do you incorporate spirituality into grieving? Because a lot of people blame God for grief and things that happen. How do you reconcile that?
I was, 12 when my brother died, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, what God, who, why, like, and then I saw my mom, who was not, she stayed home at church. We go to church, she's Orthodox, Arab Christian, and my dad's Catholic, and she stayed home during, she's like, it's my time, this is my church, you guys go to church and go. Anyways, when my brother died, it was so interesting, I saw her lean into church and be like, and going and being like, talking about God a lot and leaning into that spirituality. But when I work with a lot of people, kids who are adults, yeah, there's anger. There's big time anger, big time bitterness, big time what the fuck energy. And it's difficult, and you normalize that. I don't know, go ahead,
So, I'm a PK,
what's the
preacher's kid,
big
and I challenge my father a lot with that. And Christians will tell you, or, my father will say, don't question God, but any other time you tell me to pray, I'm questioning him when I pray because he has the answer. Right, so I'm gonna question him on this too. And I do question him. Why was my niece born with a severe disability when she didn't have to be born at all? She didn't deserve to come in the world this way. So I think it's okay to question, and hold accountable, because prayer is questioning, right? When you're asking for something and you're praying to someone who you feel has the answers. So I do question, and I think all of that goes together. There's no right or wrong on how you choose to worship and what your personal relationship is with God. I've established my own, and it's very eclectic, and it works for me. But not my dad. And for you, Dion, as we wrap, when you said how to change that, we are hard-headed sometimes as a culture and people. So my niece has 3 boys and a special needs daughter. And she always complains, their dad is not emotional. He don't show emotion, this, that, and the other. But as soon as one of the little ones cries, shut up, you all right, get up. I said, so you want to raise another emotionless man so that somebody else can be in a relationship with him later. Don't do that. It's okay for him to cry. Let him cry. He complained about his daddy all the time. That's how his daddy became that. Let him cry. It's okay. He don't have to stay there, but let him cry.
Valerie, can you take this last one?
Okay.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to, piggyback off what you were saying, is I always like to justify, crying, when people are like, I don't know, I'm crying, dad, whatever, it's cathartic, so it's like that cleansing, but it's a release. We are made to cry for a reason, like, we are physically, biologically able to cry for a reason, and that's why I think you can, start teaching and maybe helping yourself and justifying yourself, like, I wouldn't be able to do this if I wasn't supposed to. So, that's just how I think about it.
break and come back at 2 o'clock. We will continue.